Hello, welcome back to the On the House podcast. I'm Alex Berlin, and I've got my co-host here, Tyler Anderson. Last podcast, we talked a little bit about generally who we are. We introduced ourselves, and we took some time to talk about what modular construction is. I also put a placeholder in and left you guys hanging, and I apologize for that. I'll try not to do that in the future, but we were discussing code differences between types of construction, and we forayed a little bit into HUD code, and we forayed a lot more bit into IRC code. So I want to talk today about the difference between the two codes, and I want to talk today about the differences between the three main types of building that we see in our industry, maybe four types of building, I'll say. So I'm going to lead off with, good morning, Tyler.
No, good morning.
And I'm going to lead off with, Tyler, what is HUD code?
Okay, HUD code is a federal code that essentially there's different ways of building it, but it's a code that covers most of the country. That it's typically has a steel frame underneath the house. You're not going to be putting it on a permanent foundation. The homes obviously are going to finance different than they are a typical residential IRC home. They also are, you're not setting on an 8-inch concrete wall. Or
you said IRC. What's IRC for our non-code basis?
International Residential Codes.
Okay.
So typically it's what you would consider your typical mobile home. It started off as temporary housing, when the code started, and
kind of transitioned out of the RV industry.
Yeah, it's literally designed to be moved. It doesn't work that well to be moved all the time. It's a lot of work to move them. But they are designed to, have axles lag back onto the frame and move down the road. It's warped, over the years. It used to be like when my grandpa built them, it would be a 10 to 12 foot wide unit that was 60 foot long and 2 bedrooms and a kitchenette in it, and that was about all there was to it. But the whole goal was to go as cheap as you possibly can. I think it's kind of warped into something a little bit different when you started to get into multi-box stuff, or you get guys out there putting them on basements and things like that. But yeah, essentially it's a code that is financed different than your IRC homes. That is what you would consider your typical mobile home.
So we're biased.
Yeah, for sure.
We're biased, but I don't want to come off as biased in a negative light, because I think what the government's original intent was to provide an affordable housing program, which in today's world we're back after again, right? Everyone in the industry talking about affordable. Unfortunately, at the same time, they're talking about super high energy efficiency, safety, new bare minimum codes, all things that drive up cost and drive down affordability. So part of our bias, though, comes from the fact that we're constantly explaining the difference between a manufactured home and a home built using modular construction, which was built in a manufacturing facility. Yeah. Would you say? I mean, it's...
People automatically think because the house goes down the road that it is built to a HUD code or it is a mobile home, and that's just not the case.
Yeah. And you mentioned a second ago they finance differently. I want to talk about how each type of home we're going to talk about today finances differently, but it's a pretty short conversation because there's really only 2 ways to finance a home. And if it's a manufactured home, it's got a title, it's chattel property, right?
Yep.
So when you sell that home, you have to do a transfer of title, whereas the other 3 types of construction that we'll cover here today, which very quickly will be volumetric modular, which is the new term for what we are. Instead of just calling it modular, people are trying to call it volumetric modular in order to make sure you understand that it's built, like fully built, and we're shipping a cube down the road, as it were. Versus some people are using the word modular to talk about panelized or component building. So we would say volumetric modular, panelization, or building of components, wall components, some floor components, some roof components, and then assembling those components on site and still having to do quite a bit of drywall, finish work, cabinets, a lot of electrical connections, stuff like that. So that's panelized and then site built. So the 4 types of construction, like I said, are going to be, mobile homes or HUD code, and then the 3 that I just listed. And out of those 4, mobile homes or HUD code are the only one that's chattel property, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
You agree? Okay. So then the other 3.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have like the park model stuff, and that's where you were going back to. It's like it literally has come from an RV. Some of the HUD stuff has, and a park model is like right there in between an RV and a HUD too. Which obviously I don't think that's even something that we want to consider, going over.
Where's a tiny home in this? Because I love the idea of a tiny home. I'll be the first to say it. How do you feel about tiny homes?
I think
I already know the answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, I if you want a tiny home that's built to residential code, you can't make it happen. I know that, yet alone putting it on a permanent foundation.
See, I disagree with you there.
Why?
You can build a tiny home. We could build a tiny home out of this factory, ship it on a carrier, pick it up with a crane, set it down onto a permanent foundation.
But then it wouldn't be a tiny home. Is where I think the miscommunication's out there. I mean, what I think
we could build a 300 square foot home.
Like but what you see on HGTV is a tiny home is built literally on a flatbed trailer.
Okay, so you're arguing that the connotation of the word tiny home is kind of like the connotation of the word manufactured home. Mm-hmm. Like tiny home means park model in essence, or RV, or really, transportation code home.
Yeah, I'd say it's considered a high end park model.
Okay, so I've never understood that you were for that connotation.
More of a trendy park model is what I think. Now, if you wanted to build, a residential code home that's a small home, then yeah, but and put the phrase tiny home on it, you can.
So a lot of people are building those and they're calling them accessory dwelling units.
Okay.
ADUs, and then they're trying to get them, our town, Rochester, Indiana, may not approve of ADUs. Like if I wanted to go put an accessory dwelling unit in my backyard so that your mom, my mother-in-law, could live in it one day, I don't think we're allowed to do that around here. But like California, where there's extreme high density populations around cities like San Francisco, and there's a lack of land and there's a lack of affordable housing, people are trying to get ADUs approved, which is permanent housing set on a permanent foundation with no wheels underneath it, but a true tiny home.
Right, but I mean, I guess my argument a lot of times it's like I don't see that too much on the HGTVs or
right.
Anywhere. I mean, even at the show last year, they had a tiny home there, and it was literally on a flatbed trailer that was 28 foot long,
built on a frame.
On a frame.
Okay, so tiny home with Tyler's connotation of built on a frame, permanent wheels under the structure, meant to be transported from time to time, is more of is it a mobile home or is it an RV? What code is it built to? I don't even know. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think that's the big debate right now. I know that when I did talk to the guy at the show down in Alabama, they had a code that didn't fall underneath the HUD code, that they were considering it more of a tiny home code.
Home code, yeah.
Yeah, and right. I'm completely uneducated on exactly what all that means.
Yeah,
but
me too. We'll have to ask a little bit more at the show this year and see if we can figure out what code they're building to. But from an affordability standpoint, from a low debt, I mean, if you're a low debt person and can live in a micro space, what's wrong with it?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, I guess. I mean, I personally don't understand it. It seems a little dumb.
But again, we're in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And we're in the land of land.
Yeah, I guess it makes a difference.
We don't have a problem finding land out here where we're at. But East Coast, West Coast, maybe it's a little bit more
where it's
prominent.
tighter, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about financing differences, code difference between HUD code. Okay, so terminology, HUD code, mobile home, manufactured home are the same thing. They're chattel property that comes with a title, and it typically declines in value faster than any other kind of home would decline in value.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it's chattel property.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the other three types of building are all going to be financed the same way because they're an improvement to land. So you buy a piece of land, you're the new property owner, that gets recorded at your local government offices, and then you can improve that land and then reassess the value of that land. But at no point do you have a title to your foundation, have a title to the sticks that go up on top of the foundation, regardless of how they're put together, or have a title to the components that then goes in those sticks. Mm-hmm. Right. So those are all going to be financed with traditional financing methods where there's no chattel to it. It's mortgage. It's, obviously you can pay cash for anything, but they're going to be financed as an improvement to that piece of property.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about those three. So fully site built, 100% site built. Ship everything to the site. So ship every component to the job site. And this is interesting to me. Every worker drives to the job site independently, no matter of their living location. And I say that because there was recently a commercial job done, a big commercial job done in New York, and I'm talking like mega hotel, whatever it was. I forget. I'll have to pull it up. But they studied travel times to and from the job site because it was a modular build, and they said they cut down on employee drive time, gas costs by 80%.
Yeah, makes sense.
I want to say that Polcom, a Polish-based manufacturer, was who built the modules.
They shipped them here then?
They shipped them here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So they say so back to our point, total site built, everyone drives to the site independently, every product's delivered to the site independently, foundations put in, and then you start stick by stick by stick.
Yep. And it works great if you can find crews out there that understand how to do all that. It works great if you're building in good weather, if you don't have to worry about weather, which obviously in the Midwest, we obviously have our fair share of bad weather. There's a lot of products out there that have been forced to adapt, to weather. There's a lot of OSB that can sit in water for 30 days. They say you can actually let it rain on some of these products. But the bottom line is it's a lot more of a challenge to get guys out on the job site, that are trained. Like Alex said, just the driving time alone, depending on where they live, that general contractor's got to line up all of his guys to get out there and make sure that they're there on time. And then you have to have the whole setup process, which, great example, when I forgot what we were building, but those little pump houses. When we panelized them here, a lot of times when you go out to go build a home, just setting up in the morning, it takes you an hour, just to get your air compressor out, to get all your tools out. Where we come in the morning and everything's set up. Your lumber's there, your air compressor obviously is throughout the entire plant. That's up and running. You have all your nail guns, everything's there on the table. So versus, like I said, spending that hour in the morning, getting set up, and then the hour in the afternoon cleaning up, that's just pure time wasted. So, because there's a couple times that, we were doing little projects. I remember when me and Alex first started getting involved in the business, where it's like, hey, I think we were talking about building a shed at one point. Yep. It's like, well, we could build it, just build a stick frame in your backyard. Nope, it'd be easier just to panelize it and then, then we'll run it out there and screw it together.
Yeah.
So just the efficiencies of having everything set up, is huge versus the two things. But a site-built home, I guess, getting back to, a stick-built home, is everything's delivered from your local lumber yard. The guys will get there, they'll set up, they'll stick frame it, and then everything will progress slowly as materials get delivered, you get set up, and the labor's there to get everything put together.
Foundation types. What types of foundations are available to full site built construction?
Your typical block foundation, which is just cinder blocks that are concrete.
Okay, so you're talking about methodologies for installing a foundation, which are block, mixed and poured concrete, or now there's panelized concrete, which is another fun topic that we can get into at a later date. But what I'm talking about is slab, crawl, basement. So,
okay.
Yeah, so depth of grade
okay.
would have been a better way to ask that question.
Yeah, okay, so a slab house is essentially you're going to pour a concrete slab, and your walls will go right onto that slab. All of your plumbing is in the concrete. It is the most affordable way to build, sometimes depending on where you're at.
That's changed a little bit, though, with the energy conversation.
Right.
The affordability is declining with slab foundations because you have to almost overbuild compared to how people used to do it in order to keep your energy envelope efficient, right?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, they're having to dig footers deeper.
Yeah,
there's more concrete going into a slab than there ever was.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, typically on a slab, you are required to have, to go down way below the frost line in several different locations, have your rebar properly installed. The regulation probably isn't where it needs to be with it. I know in higher density populations it is, but yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, I think you're going to start seeing more people, if they are wanting a smaller footprint, if they're not wanting a basement, that they'll end up on a crawl space, just for the fact of, like Alex did say, the energy efficiency, using the heat from the ground to heat that house.
Yeah. And we're gonna dig one day on this podcast. We're gonna dig into crawl space, conditioned crawl space versus unconditioned crawl space methodology, ideology, and that's going to lead into an HVAC and energy conversation that I can't wait to have. I'm geeked out to have, and everybody on the Rochester Home team that's listening to this podcast just giggled, got a good belly chuckle out of that because they know I'm a geek about it. In fact, they know not to bring it up around me unless they've got a good 30 to 45 minutes for me to preach to them, get on my soapbox. So anyways, backing up, slab is the most affordable, is the bottom line. Crawl space is the next most affordable.
Yeah,
there's not as much concrete.
Yeah, and it's like,
that's all there's to it.
Yeah, a crawl space is essentially a 3 or a 4 foot concrete wall that'll sit on a 24-inch footer. That'll come depending on how your site is. You try to keep it as 12 to 16 inches above grade.
Yeah.
And then obviously you get into your basement, which is going to be just a taller wall.
And then you got a poured floor.
And a poured floor.
More concrete. What would you say to the customers who ask us, I'm looking to save money, so I'm going to do a half crawl, half basement?
I'd say that is not worth it.
You're not going to save money because you still have 4 tall walls.
Well, you might save some money, but I don't think you're going to save a drastic amount of money. I guess you're going to save the money. Footprint of the house, how big the house is.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. But you're going to save the money of the poured floor on the crawl space portion is basically what you're going to save, in essence, depending on the footprint.
Yeah, well, and then there's a little bit in the height of the wall on the other side of the house.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so site builders have the flexibility to do any kind of foundation. So bookmark that in your mind, Mr. and Mrs. Listener, if you would, Miss and everybody involved. Got to encompass everyone here. Site builders, 90%, 80% at the very least, of the homes that are built in our country are built by
site builders.
I was looking for tract builders there.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
tract builders. Or
Same thing.
big companies, production-based, volume-based, big animals. The world of small builder is declining rapidly, right?
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Especially in high population areas.
High density population areas, suburban areas, which is where more of the populace is moving to nowadays, is mainly controlled by tract builders. My opinion on that is because the development game, the site development game, has gotten so costly, so burdened by regulation, that only the big guys can play and make it efficient. I mean, the cost to go in and find 5 acres of open ground around Indianapolis, one, the cost that land's up right now because Indy's a booming area for the Midwest, I would argue. And then 2, the roads, the quality of the roads that you have to put in has gone up drastically over the course of the last 20 years, increasing costs there. Your regulatory burdens, trying to get it all platted out, designed out properly, make sure you're up to snuff with the local county, water pipe requirements, possible readiness for sprinklers with fire hydrant codes and stuff like that.
And the problem is, you depending on who you ask, you get several different answers, with regulation, so. Yeah. I think that's part of the frustration with it. It's like, how much time and energy do these small guys want to spend, jumping all these hoops? It's like he said this, but she said that. And a lot of it's just, at the end of the day, is just personal preference from local authority.
Yeah, so the general business model of tract builder, and, maybe once we get an email up and running for our podcast, the general methodology, I might get some kickback on that, is where I was going there, but the general methodology is I'm going to go in, I'm going to develop a piece of land, or I'm going to buy a significant amount of lots on a pre-developed piece of land, buy options even, and I'm going to offer certain floor plans with certain options, and I'm going to build to this spec level for this area, but generally, you're going to have a choice of 1 or 2 windows. You're going to have a choice of 1 or 2 cabinets. You're going to have a choice of 1 or 2 countertops. Mm-hmm. Am I wrong?
No.
But bigger companies, great at marketing, great at design. So they build a good product, typically, but they're more volume mindset, production mindset. So we call tract builders production builders, and they're the vast majority of the site builders in this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your big subdivisions that that you're going to see off of 465 in Indy or whatever.
Yeah. So then when people are saying around Indy, I built a custom home, the tract builders have marketed into that a little bit, I would argue. They say, hey, you're allowed to come in and design your own home to a degree, but they're probably not going to let you go ground up, brand new design, architect involved kind of thing in one of their subdivisions.
Right.
Most likely.
And still stay at the price point anyways.
Yeah, they're probably not going to play that game with you. But the interesting thing to me is, I won't name names, but one of the bigger tract builders in Indianapolis, I was down checking out one of their model homes a year and a half ago, 2 years ago maybe now already, and beautiful home, absolutely beautiful home. I think the price tag on it was $650,000-ish. So pretty high price point. I said, what does it take for me to get into this home? What kind of documentation do I have to provide to you that I'm ready to start building this home on that blank lot over there? $1,000.
Wow.
$1,000. Now that $1,000 is then going to be subject to, background checks, credit checks, kind of stuff like that, pre-approval, but they'll start the process for $1,000. And the line of thinking there, what I assume the line of thinking there is, though, is that they're building a pretty, they know what they're building. A pretty standardized, pretty standardized floor plan. They know that if that $1,000 customer falls through, they're probably going to be able to sell that home. They don't want to go build that home on spec. They don't want to speculatively build that home in the hopes that someone will buy it. They hope that customer works out, but they're willing to take a $1,000 bet basically to say either this customer is going to go through or we're going to sell this home based on spec.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that is. Yeah,
because our homes are customizable to the point where we wouldn't allow that. you can change the floor plans to the point, and some people do a great job with it, and some are a little scary to look at. The first one you designed was kind of scary. Scary to look at.
Model home?
Do you remember that? No, it wasn't a model home. It was It was going to be your home. You were learning AutoCAD, and one of the practices is just drawing more homes. So you drew up a home, and you showed it to me, and I said, that's an awesome home for a single male in his 20s. You remember that?
Yeah.
So anyways, our customers have the ability to do that.
Yeah, and we see a lot. I mean, you got to stay within our widths and things like that. But we have everything all pre-designed to where we know how far you can open up a header, or we know how far you can span on a marriage line, or whatever the case might be. We have to stick within those parameters. But overall, you can get to pretty close to where you want to be. Just sticking with what we have. But yeah, there's been several times, you'll run a house through, it's like, holy crap, I didn't realize that, why do they have this gap here? Well, the customer has some grand idea that was just kind of off the wall that most people would think is kind of bizarre.
Right. So we couldn't then, if that customer fell through, we couldn't sell that home on spec.
Right.
In our opinion.
No,
it would be very tough to do. Yeah. So you can't come buy a house through one of our builders for $1,000.
Right.
Which is just ease of building. They won. Let's put a win in their column because they just kicked our butt on that. But much bigger companies.
Well, a lot of the times too, it's because the house is already built.
Ease of getting started, I should say.
Yeah. If you're building, but a lot of those guys, they'll have a couple already built. You walk through, and especially, our generation, anyways, they want it now. You have the Amazon generation, millennials that if you can get it now, you can get literally anything you want right now with Amazon.
Yeah.
So they'll walk through these houses that are already built. They're brand new. They see that it's got granite countertops, and they automatically think it's nice. But they don't. What they don't realize is that the cabinets are about as cheapest quality of cabinets they can get, and the granite countertops are 3/4 of an inch.
Yeah. So that, and then back to marketing, back to wonderful marketing. This house I walked in for $650,000 had quartz countertops, vinyl windows, there's nothing wrong with vinyl windows. I love vinyl windows. Affordability is great. We use a glass in ours, and I'm sure a lot of people do. That's Energy Star rated in all the areas that we build in. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with them. I was just shocked because traditionally, 10 years ago, the line was you have to put wood windows in a certain price point of house. Yep. And then the cabinets, and this is a small measure of quality. It's not the be-all, end-all of cabinet making by any means, but they weren't soft-closed drawers. And I was just like, wow, this expensive a home, this level of home, I thought you would have had to put those things in. But the marketing team decided, hey, we're going to focus on quartz countertops. We're going to take the savings from these other few things, put in quartz countertops, and it was working well for them. So we've digressed a little bit, but the point is, from our seat on the bus, most site building is done through track building. And the question I then posed was, when someone says they get a custom home, they build a custom home, they're either talking about a high-end, slightly customizable track built home, or there are obviously companies out there who are not as big as the track builders, who are still building a few homes a year, maybe even 10, 15 homes a year, who are doing a really high-end design, who are doing architect-driven plans, full customization, customers coming in, picking out all their individual components. I mean, that still exists in our country.
It's expensive.
It's very expensive. I can imagine the stress level.
Yeah, well, just the planning to actually make that happen takes a long time.
And you have to if you're given a blank slate on building products, even I, who love shopping building products, I love design implementation,
it can be overwhelming.
I would be sick and tired of it by the end of it. And that's the other thing. I'll put a feather in the cap of the big production builders is they've taken most of that work out of the customer's hands. They might have a couple-hour design meeting, and but they're watching the trends, and then they're selling the trends, and most of these people walk in and they say they have 6 options to pick from. It makes it pretty fast. Yeah, and so our model leans a little bit more towards the production. We offer these things. Now, in our system, you can omit something that you don't like our countertop color choices. You can omit them, and your builder, your general contractor, can help you finish out totally custom on site. So we kind of live in between the production builders and the custom builders. Would you say that?
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair statement.
Okay, so we talked about site building to a degree. We're not getting super granular, but we talked about it a little bit. Panelized.
Yeah,
I don't know a ton about panelized. I feel like
I
up and coming.
I honestly don't. I mean, I know that there's all kinds of different methods out there. I personally don't see a huge value in it. The reason being, you can stick frame a house pretty stinking quick. You can get it under weather quick. The reason I think modular makes more sense is because when we ship those units to you and you get set on your foundation, your cabinets are hung, 90% of your drywall's done. You have some of your flooring can even be installed. I mean, there's just a lot more that we can do here in the plant. All your shingling's done, your electrical's done. Versus panelized is essentially they'll come up with a design, and they'll build your exterior walls. Say it's a 2x6 exterior walls. They'll sheet it. They'll design that to go down onto your sill plate, and then they'll send out a plan to the job site, and then they'll essentially semi-truck all these panelized walls in, and have to assemble them and screw them together, on site. I mean, keep in mind, I'm not fully educated on everything on panelized walls, but from what I've seen, we were out somewhere out on the East Coast. Where were we, in Boston?
It's right outside of Boston. About an hour outside of Boston.
Yeah.
Katera was the name of the...
Yeah,
which is an offshoot of Ted Benson's Unity Homes, which is a big name in the news right now in our industry because they're taking on a lot of funding and trying to really grow that panelized market. Really automated, some really cool stuff there. They're not just panelizing the walls anymore. They're panelizing floor components. So maybe the floors are built into 10 pieces instead of 1,000 pieces between floor joists and screws and decking that you put together on site. So they're closer to modular, and maybe that's why people are starting to use the term modular for panelized in some instances, because they do have modules. They're not what we would call a volumetric module with cabinets hung, but they're closer than panelized has ever been. Right.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, I know that a lot of guys, they can go out there, they can bang on a floor pretty quick, as long as that material's there. And again, I know you got to go through that setup process, but you're going to have to do that anyways to fasten panels together. There's just a lot of different variables that can happen, with the framing itself, that I just think it's not the most valuable way of going about it. If you're just focusing on the stick frame,
you got to have. You would argue that you have to have a really high level of design, like a really, really strong engineering team to turn idea into reality on site, knowing that the site is going to bring in some variables.
Right.
That's what your argument is.
Yep.
Okay. I'll say I think the argument for panelized is getting louder and louder because of the lack of labor in the country.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, because you're absolutely right. A good framing crew can have something under weather in a day.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what you're building. Yeah.
A monstrous house a week. I mean, a really custom house a week, right?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the square footage. And there's a lot of variables, but yeah.
But it takes 10 guys. It takes 10 good guys. Especially in the case of a site framer where you have to have 10 guys that you can't watch over their shoulder all the time. We've got checkpoints and supervisors and third-party inspection agencies who are helping us keep our goal of quality first. Whereas when I was on a site crew, at least, I tell the story all the time. It was, hey, go cut these 14.5-inch blocks, install them in between the studs on the second floor of this 2-story right at the level of the decking. Okay, I'm a kid. I start off with 14.5-inch blocks. I go to 14. I go to 16. I get sloppy with my work is the point. And so I was angling them in. I was gapping. I was just shooting them in even if there was a gap.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the whole upper level of the 2-story this way. I get to the next job site, and my boss says, hey, go install those fire blocks. Okay, what are fire blocks? Well, those are those blocks you were putting in between the studs. Those are meant to block, to give the homeowner the time of burn that would take to get through that block before the fire gets upstairs. They can hopefully get smoke detected or, sense heat in some way, shape, or form and get downstairs so they're not trapped. And I'm like, oh, shit. I put a family at risk because of the lack of quality control of some new guy on a job site. So my point is, it takes 10 good guys. Mm-hmm. And those are harder and harder to find.
Yeah.
And people our age.
I guess my argument, though, would be on a panelized wall system, you still have to have good guys that know how it goes together.
Yeah, but less of them, right?
I don't know. I don't have any experience with it. All I know is that it's no different in our industry today. If we make a mistake in the plant, we send it out to the builders. The builder calls me and he says, what the hell? Why did you send me this thing? And it's just a frustration because it gets passed down the line where, I can see where you'd have the exact same phenomenon on site. So that's why, in my opinion, it would be easier just to control it by, just sticking and framing it on site. But
okay,
does that make sense? I guess like let's say you get that panel out there and it's out of whack a little bit and it's all sheeted and there's nothing they can do. So they're back to square one and they got to they have to rebuild it anyways. So, and I'm sure that the penalized guys, if that's all they do, if all they're doing is building walls and, putting OSB sheathing on it, for your exterior walls, I'm sure that they have to have a degree of that. Especially, if you're building on a concrete wall, that could have some imperfections that would lean that wall. There's all kinds of different variables that makes that method, to where I'm not super sold on it yet. Anyway.
You're not really behind it yet. Right. I don't disagree with you, but I would say that if the labor issue in our country doesn't turn around,
oh, for sure,
and we're not producing people who want to be in the building trades, which that's going to be a theme of conversation on this show for the next year at the very least, is talking about the fact that young people aren't getting into the building trades. The people who are professionals in the building trades are starting to age out, the boomer generation. But if that problem doesn't get fixed, we may see panelization continue to take off, which is why I think
panelization or modular.
Yeah. Right. But there's a point where we'll both admit, and it's harder for me than it is for you because I'm so gung-ho about it, but there's a point where some customer brings us a plan and we have to say that is probably better achieved site built.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe that conversation is turning into that's probably a better achieved panelized because of the labor issue. I'll just say real quick, I want to make sure people don't think like, okay, there it is. There's if we really get custom, we're going to go site build anyways. It's based on, in my opinion, the roof lines. And it's not that we can't do it. It's that when we're shipping 16 boxes to a job site with no roof on it because the roof lines are so complex that they can only be custom built on site, there's no truss design that can make up for it, then we say, like, you're really decreasing your efficiency. Mm-hmm. And that's just our business. That's just Rochester Homes line of thinking. Well, there are companies out east who do that every day.
Yeah, it's like our conversation a couple weeks ago. I do like the idea of, hey, I'm going to spend 1 month and I'm just going to build this, 18 box, 8,000 square foot, very complex roof line. And then I'm going to be the one that runs it down the line. I'm going to watch it as it goes down the assembly line. Then I'm going to go out on the job site and physically, set that house up and work with the customer directly. I could see where you could have some excitement with that because it's definitely different than just building your basic home, and it's all possible to do modular, but it's not you lose your efficiencies because you're not running the volume.
Okay. While you were talking, I pulled up some information from the NAHB. And before we get into modular construction, which we only have a few minutes for at this point, modular homes started in 2017 in the East North Central region, which encompasses Michigan, both lower and upper, Minnesota, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. So it's not all of our territory, but it's a pretty good chunk of our territory. We also do business in Missouri, Iowa. We've done some Minnesota. We've done some Tennessee. I said Minnesota is encompassed in East North Central. I'm sorry, that's not right. East North Central is Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. That was a blunder. There were 2,280 modular homes started in 2017. Okay, based off of that number, in the same region, how many panelized, or they're also called pre-cut in some instances, homes were started in 2017?
Double?
You think twice the amount? The number is 742.
Oh, really?
So panelized right now is typically less across all regions than modular is. And this you'll find this interesting. Modular in the middle Atlantic, which isn't quite up to New York. Well, let's include New York, down the East Coast to Pennsylvania, would be 4,000 modular units, and that number in panelized is 1,290, so 1,300.
Wow.
So, if that tells you anything about the difference. So while I'm gonna keep looking for site built. Now, this is interesting. Again, this information coming from the NHB. Site built outside of, this is inside and outside of metro areas. Total number site built 2017 is a little over 800,000. Modular total is a little under 14,000.
Wow.
Drastic reduction there. Mm-hmm. And total panelized is actually a little bit over 16,000, slightly over 16,000. So panelized, I misspoke earlier. I said it's typically less, and I'm trying to look and see where the difference is. But it looks like panelized in the South Atlantic region is quite a bit more than modular, and Pacific is quite a bit more too. So maybe again, South, East Coast, and West Coast they're picking up on the panelized trend a little bit faster than they are on the modular. I'll say too, that's an area to my knowledge that's a little bit devoid of modular manufacturers. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's modular manufacturers, and we'll get into this in another show because we're starting it long. But modular spans from what on the West Coast they'll call a prefab, a modern prefab home, which typically isn't like run down a production line. They're just building a home in pieces off site, but that piece is built from the ground up without moving. Whereas our production, you start in floors and you literally roll the home down our production line in each stage, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you get on the West Coast, and they get into some pretty complex stuff. I don't know what's the total percentage of homes out there, or total.
This information doesn't have percentages.
Or total amount of mods. I know the West Coast I thought was lower.
I'll keep scrolling for the information. The total amount of mods on the West Coast, which is the Pacific region, which is the entire West Coast of our country, modular was 133. And again, I think that speaks to a lack of manufacturers.
Oh yeah, for sure.
As much as it does.
Well, you have a couple
of the technology. 1598 is the panelized and pre-cut number there.
Well, like the one I know out there is, I know that their business model they have a lot of different hinge systems that are. It's a pretty complex high-end product.
Yeah, but they're doing a lot less. Like I haven't found a lot of companies that are building a high-end, really custom mod and are doing 300 homes a year. I haven't found them.
Right.
Anybody who's listening, feel free to write in and show them to me. South Atlantic, while we're on the conversation, modular homes started in 2017. I said that was the other region we're down. We're 4361 versus 7,004 panelized. So those two regions alone start to make up for a little bit of the difference. Southwest Central, which is like Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, it looks like, they're more panelized. Mountains a little bit more modular. So it's interesting information. But talk a little bit about, so panelized, we talked about foundations with site built. I think panelized can do any foundation type as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, so talk a little bit about, let's get into modular, volumetric modular, which is what we are at Rochester Homes. Talk a little bit about foundation restrictions, and then talk a little bit about the difference in completion of the home.
Yeah, okay. So your foundation, we started talking about slab there. That's just completely out of the question for what we do. You couldn't just set a 2x10 floor, directly on a slab. We start off with...
So because the floor is built into our product.
Correct, yeah.
It would be wasteful to do so anyways. You'd have a slab floor, and you'd have a wood floor.
And you really couldn't do that anyways. But so most of our builders are going on an 8-inch concrete wall. Wouldn't you say that's fair to say?
Yeah.
In the Midwest.
What are Superior walls? Are they 8 or 10?
10, I believe.
The Superior is a brand. I don't know how many other brands are out there, but that's the panelized.
It's a precast wall.
Precast wall, thank you. Precast concrete wall.
Yeah, and I'd say, what would you say, 10% of our homes?
Or sit on a, I don't know.
Even less?
Maybe.
Yeah, we have a couple builders that prefer those, which is essentially it's a little bit thicker wall, but they come in panels. It's designed to set on like a 73s, like a rock base footer, below the
versus
frost
a poured footer.
Yeah, versus a concrete footer. You'll fasten those together. Those are a little bit more of a hassle to set on, just because for us because of movement. But if you're a site built on a panelized wall, they work out pretty well. The advantage of them is, first of all, they're going to be more money up front, but you're not going to have to fur out the concrete wall, on site to meet the energy code. So a lot of the panelized stuff, or the panelized walls for the concrete, that is driven a lot by local energy codes. So like up by the Chicago area, I know a lot of guys do it because it helps it so they can insulate the walls easier. They don't have to have a concrete wall, then a 2x4 wall insulated. They can go bring in these panels. You can bolt them together, and then once the house is set on the foundation, you can insulate that actual wall itself. So, but like I said, I'd say most of what we do is an 8-inch concrete wall. We have a couple guys that still do the blocks, but it's
8-inch
pretty
poured
rare.
concrete wall.
Poured, yeah.
Okay, so those are we crawl space or full basements available, but not the slab as you said. So then,
what would you say our percentage of basements is now?
70.
Yeah,
not quite 3/4, but 60 to 70%.
Yeah,
there was a time where it was all crawl space, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think when I started in 2008, 2009, we did mainly crawl spaces.
Well, and we've expanded our market territory, and we do a lot more in Illinois and Iowa than we ever did. Mm-hmm. And most customers in Illinois and Iowa say, I have to have a basement.
Yeah.
There are builders who would argue against that, and I don't want to get into that today, but that's the truth. Whereas Michigan, I typically don't have people walk in and say, don't talk to me unless you're going to build me a basement. There's a lot more crawl spaces still in Michigan, right? Okay, so then how much of a modular home can be finished in the factory before it ships?
That's a impossible question.
Come on.
It depends on the complexity of the house.
Okay, let's say our most affordable home. If the goal is affordability, I would argue do as much in the factory as possible, right? Mm-hmm. So a 1,500 square foot rectangle perimeter shaped home with our standard 612 roof pitch.
Yeah, I'd say 85% would be a good number.
If your goal is affordability, you're gonna take our standard siding, vinyl siding. You're gonna take, you're gonna do all of our standard finishes. You're gonna install our cabinets, which again, you can leave any of these things off if you don't like them. But and my point in saying that is that to answer Tyler's question of how much is it done, you could only frame a mod if you wanted to and ship it to the site. We don't do a lot of it, but you could frame and drywall and ship it to the site.
Well, it goes back to that panelized thing. I think we don't do a lot of it because we don't believe that there's as much of a value there.
Yeah. But for instance, we're working with Habitat for Humanity here, and we're going to build out the frame. We're going to sheet the house, the exterior of the house, and we're going to. Are we shingling it?
We're shingling.
We're
going to get it weather tight.
Habitat volunteers to get onto the roof. That's kind of a no-no.
But we're essentially doing everything on the outside, and the inside's just all going to be, just
rough frame.
Down.
We'll put ceiling on the drywall because it's so much easier in our system for us to do that.
Yep.
But we're going to do that, and because they have volunteers coming in to finish out that job, that makes sense for them. If you're a homeowner, it makes a lot less sense to do part of it through us and then a vast majority of it on site. But to get back to the point, if you're doing as much as you can through us, 80 to 85%, you're going to get siding on the front door side of the home and the back. And the opposite side of the home is that you're going to get all but 6 rows of shingles.
Yeah. Well, actually, 3. I mean,
three per half, though.
Yeah, 3 per half.
So 6 for the house.
Yep.
And that's where our roof folds.
Yep. And then you're going to have your ridge cap and your ridge vent. I mean, that's as simple as it gets there.
Cabinets are hung.
Yep, cabinets are hung.
Wet area flooring or anywhere where there's like sinks. So
installed.
Kitchen, dining room, bathrooms is installed with us. Cabinets are hung on the wall, ready to put plates in.
Yep.
Countertops are on. Drywall is mudded, sanded, taped, prime.
Yep, stagger back in certain areas, to go across the marriage line, but obviously you're still going to have drywall cracks and things like that to fix, just from shipment and set on the house. But you're going to have your centerline OSB. You got to install any trim work that we had to stagger back. You have to install on-site mechanicals, on-site plumbing connections, water supply connections, drain connections. Garages, porches, things like that, if they choose to go that route.
So okay, all right. That's a good start on what volumetric modular is.
Yeah.
Leave it there today. What we didn't do is talk about the negatives much of modular. We said that there were some limitations in our opinion. Again, West Coast manufacturers might argue that with us. Definitely some East Coast manufacturers would argue that with us, where they say there's no limitations. I'll ship you 24 to 60 modules if it takes to build a floor plan that way, and we're just going to build the roof on site. We, as a company, happen to not believe in that as much, but that's where panelized comes in, and then there's full site built. So I'm going to give you some quick numbers on. I'm going to go back to some numbers I mentioned earlier, but I'm going to break it down into in a metropolitan statistical area versus not in an MSA. Mm-hmm. I'll give you those numbers for each of the 3 types of non-HUD building, and then I'm going to use that to see if you can point to the same issue or the same negative downside to modular that we tend to run into, at least. Okay, so site built in an MSA in 2017, these are starts, not full build outs, starts 741,745 according to the NHB. Mm-hmm. Not in an MSA, so rural areas would be 71,572. That's 10%. They only build site-built homes were only 10% outside of suburbs or cities. Mm-hmm. Does that surprise you?
A little bit. Yeah, I guess I'm not.
See, it doesn't surprise me because I've read stats that track builders or production builders, the big boys, are 80% of the building.
Because
those guys don't operate out there. They're developing. They're as much of land development companies as they are builders, in my opinion. Okay, so then modular in a metropolitan statistical area is 7,051, and not in an MSA is 6,203. 60. So all modular building is about 10% of the site-built rural building. I find that interesting. I'm sorry, 20% of the site-built rural building. In an MSA is 10% of the site-built rural building. So we're obviously a much smaller piece of the puzzle, but we have a bigger rural build as a percentage of our total builds. Why?
Well, I think it goes back to the track. Yeah, availability maybe.
Availability of land, lack of modular companies developing land, and I'll also say that it's much easier to coordinate the site logistics
if they're all
out in the
together.
middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
you
and
know,
everything's together.
Shipping's easy. There's always a place to put modules. I'm not shutting down roads. There's always a place to put the crane. When you're in the land of land, it makes everything easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's
but that argument could be made on track builders that have huge subdivisions. You know what I mean? If you could bring in units and they could set them if they have 5 acres that they're building on, but for whatever reason, I don't know why that a lot of them haven't gone that route.
Right. Which will be interesting to watch in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
How many of the big boys start to use panelization or modular. So then, and again, I was surprised to see that there's more mod building, and it's slightly more, but there's more mod building in the cities, in the suburbs and the cities than there is in the rural areas. And I would attribute that to the East Coast manufacturers, which there's a big concentration of East Coast modular manufacturers who build a great product, similar to what we build, and they do it in a very densely populated area. So they have to go fight that fight. They have to go find land. Their customers have to go find land, and they have to make the logistics work, and they do it, obviously. I was surprised by that fact.
Well, yeah, a lot of that could be builder adaptation. You know, if a builder's used to, getting these boxes in tight spots, they just know, what they can and cannot do.
Yeah. So I'm going to, real quick too, because I mentioned that there's a concentration of East Coast manufacturers, I'll also mention that there's a concentration of Midwest manufacturers, but I'm going to get into a slang term here. I don't know if you know where I'm headed yet with this. Hudgler. Most of the Midwest manufacturers focus mainly on building HUD code homes. True or false?
True.
True.
The bigger ones do, yeah.
Yeah, the big boys. The ones who foray into an entry-level affordable modular but run it on the same production line as their mobile home products, as their HUD code products, we kind of jokingly in the industry call it a Hudgler because it's built to IRC codes and can pass, but it's built on the same production line with as close to components as can get and as close to practices as get to building a HUD.
Yeah,
So,
the problem is you'll get that residential IRC codes in the house, but you're going to get the mobile home material that they use,
and quality on that production line. That production line is driven to a certain level of quality. Their checkpoints are only a certain level, and that's what you're going to get.
Well, and just from an operational standpoint, to have a QC manual that does both is hard to do. To be able to inspect to do 2 different codes is a difficult thing to do. Yet alone, if you're running volume, so a lot of these guys, they'll be running, 4 to 8 floors a day, and to try to keep up to quality standards, so one house will be, or you'll run 2 in a row that'll be built to a HUD code, and then you'll run 4 that'll be built to a modular code. And you have a different roof system or whatever the case might be. To monitor all of that is the challenge. Your QC manager really has to be on his game.
Yeah.
So
we would argue that we don't build any HUD code on our product line. We haven't built HUD code in
it's been a long time.
15 years, 20 years, maybe not that long.
They might dabbled in it.
So we would argue that our quality, some of the East Coast manufacturers that I'm talking about is going to be vastly different from what we jokingly call that Hudgler code because we just don't mix.
Right.
But we're more expensive. Our building components are more expensive. We don't build as many homes by a long shot, So we don't have as big of a purchasing power, and yada yada yada. Bottom line is we're a little bit more expensive too. So there's a downside to that if you want to look at it that way. Okay, so final stats here. Panelized. We talked about site built. We talked about modular. Panelized numbers in an MSA, 15,396. Outside of an MSA was only 742. So that, in my mind, speaks to your point of it's pretty quick to frame up a house. And when you have the ability to do that in a rural site, and you have people maybe, and you don't have to deal with site logistics, it's just not efficient to bring in a panelized product to that environment. Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I think.
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not as educated on the panelized thing as I'd like to be, but I will be interested mainly because of the labor issues that everybody's fighting. Will that panelized thing take off just because of the perception that people don't like the modular thing because it reminds them of a mobile home? Like, will people go out of their way just to say, hey, I'm going to build a panelized house, even though it'd be more affordable, it'd be better built, modular, but just because they don't like the idea of it coming in, on a carrier and the neighbors seeing their house, come in on wheels essentially.
Yeah, because you can tell, and I can tell for the most part, not with 100% accuracy, but when we see a unit, a modular or mobile unit shipping down the road, we can probably tell you with 90% accuracy that that's either a mobile home or HUD code, or that's a full-blown residential code house just shipping in pieces.
Yep.
But I would argue that John Smith and Jane Smith
have no idea,
would not be able to do that. So they see that going down the road and probably think, there goes another mobile home.
Yep.
So that's what you're speaking to. Okay, a couple more things. Size of new homes started in 2017 according to the NAHB. Site built was 2,400. Modular was 1,700. Panelized, do you think it's bigger or smaller?
But you're talking about square footage.
I'm talking square footage, yeah. You think bigger or small? I'm covering up my screen.
For panelized?
Yeah, than modular. So again, site built was 2,400. Modular 1,700 square feet.
I'd say bigger.
This is median, and you're right. It's bigger. It's 2,600. It's actually bigger than site built.
Yeah. I mean, I think in order to get to the efficiencies, you almost, with panelized, you almost would have to be bigger, I would think.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then census data on construction time. This is average time from start to completion for single-family homes in 2017, according to the NHB. Site built was 5 months, modular was 3.8 months, and panelized or pre-cut was 4.7 months.
Mm-hmm. So they are saving some time.
A little bit of time. I think we covered it for today.
Okay, cool.
Closing thoughts, closers?
I don't.
I got nothing.
Okay.
That's all for today.